And we're joined by Matt Babcock of Babcock Hoops and basketballnews.com. Mr. Babcock, how you doing today, sir?
No, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really happy we could get you on this time around. Talked with your cohort Derek Murray last time, and we got the Mr. Babcock himself. So I'm very excited for this one. I know you're heading on a 12-day road trip here soon. What's this trip looking like for you? Are you going to some workouts, stuff like that?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. My first stop is Houston, Texas. Going to a high school tournament, see a handful of top guys, to try and get a head start on guys before they become imminent draft prospects. And then Derek and I are both going to Miami for 4 or 5 days to pre-draft workouts. And Miami's really turned into a hot spot. I mean, I could list off a ton of guys. I've seen Kuminga, James Bouknight, Trey Murphy, Trey Mann. I mean, the list goes on and on. Probably going to see like 10 plus guys. And then from there, we're going to the Tampa Bay Pro Combine, which is June 3rd to the 6th, which I'm co-chair of the player selection committee with Fran Fraschilla. And so our whole basketball news crew will be there. We got a bunch of guys that are turning the page from college to pro. And then my final stop is Las Vegas for the Pangos All-American Camp, which is high school camp in Vegas. Should be good. So busy couple weeks coming up, but should be fruitful.
That's awesome. That I'm honestly incredibly jealous. That sounds so much fun. So when you're at these workouts, what are you exactly looking for? And maybe not necessarily the tangible things as far as, jump shot creation, all that explosiveness. Is there anything you're looking for that might not necessarily be those tangible things, or maybe even the tangibles, like the most important thing you're looking for in these workouts?
I don't think there's necessarily one thing or another. I mean, all these kids that we've got, listed that we're set to see, we know all of them, some better than others, but I think just about every guy in the draft I've seen in person at least once over the last few years. And so when we go to these workouts, it's an opportunity to kind of get like an intimate look at a kid. A lot of times we'll be able to talk to the guys, just get a better feel for their personality and just see where they're at with their bodies. Looking at guys' shooting mechanics. I mean, it's a little bit of everything. I mean, sometimes you don't know what you're looking for. You kind of keep your finger on a pulse and head on a swivel and kind of making notes along the way.
Awesome. Well, as we approach the actual draft and at least the lottery coming up here in about a month, the Pels are sitting at probably going to be drafting around 10. That's the highest percentage likelihood that they're going to end up at. I know you did your mock basketball news. You did your mock prior to the coin flips and all that, and the Pelicans were picking 8. Have you looked any more into doing a new mock anytime soon, or do you have anybody in that 10 to 14 range that you think would fit the Pels?
Yeah, we did our first mock draft. We converted our big board to a mock draft last week, I believe, and and so they did the tiebreakers on, so the order's a little bit shaken up from that. We had them taking James Bouknight at 8, who I think would be a great fit if he's there on the board for them. Just a dynamic scoring shooting guard from UConn. I think the Pelicans could use use another guy. In guard that creates some offense, and that's Bouknight for sure. Some other guys. I mean, depending on where they're picking and who's available, I think there's a big group of guys after you get out of that top 5 or 6. Keon Johnson from Tennessee, Kai Jones, Corey Kissbert, Franz Wagner, Davion Mitchell, Josh Giddey, Moses Moody. I mean, those are all guys that I think could be on the board in the mix for them. All very different, but the Pelicans are an interesting situation where they've got a lot of nice young pieces and a good core unit. They don't necessarily need like one thing or another. They just need some more guys and let their guys kind of continue to develop. So I do think they have some flexibility with what they do in the draft.
Well, what I can tell you, what we've heard from the front office so far, David Griffin, he's mentioned 3 things that this team needs in the offseason, whether it's through the draft or free agency or trades or what have you. It's IQ, it's toughness, and it's shooting. Obviously, you think of Kissbert when it comes to shooting, but are there any players, and maybe that don't embody all 3, because having IQ and toughness at the NBA level is a lot to ask out of these young guys coming right away. I mean, obviously you get the Matisse Thybulle kind of guys on defense and stuff like that occasionally, but are there any players in particular in that group that you just mentioned that have 2 or 3 of those skills, those particular attributes, and maybe coming right out of the draft, or have at least the potential to have something like that?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, several of those guys I listed, have it on some level or another. I think Kissbert, obviously, he's known as a shooter. I think he's the best shooter in the draft at 6'7". But he's a high basketball IQ kid. I mean, that's the advantage of him, being a 4-year guy at a big program in Gonzaga. And he's tough. I mean, he's definitely not, your tough defensive stopper. I think his physical limitations hold him back there, but he does have a tough way about him. And I mean, he's the kind of kid I'd want on my team, kind of going into battle, and would fit that fit a need for them as far as checking off multiple boxes, especially shooting. Davion Mitchell's another guy, and he is a tough defender. I mean, that guy's probably the best on-ball defender in the draft, just so physical and really just a pest. And then he developed so much at Baylor with his outside shooting and his basketball IQ and feel for the game. Of course, they took Kyra Lewis last year, so I mean, he plays the same position as him. I don't know if they'd want to add another young point guard, but Mitchell's pretty dang good. I would bet he'll be considered. And then Moses Moody is another guy. High basketball IQ, shooter. He's got good size and he's good defensive. He's not overly athletic, and I wouldn't even really label him a tough guy, but he is a good versatile defender that shoots it, that knows how to play. Those are three guys that I could see, the Hornets, or excuse me, the Pelicans considering.
Sure. So I've seen a lot of guys like Davion Mitchell, the Twitter experts, Davion Mitchell, the Kissbert suggestions. I've also seen on ESPN's mock draft, Franz, whatever. I have not done enough evaluation to even pronounce these guys' names right. So Franz Wagner out of Michigan, brother of Mo. So what do you think of him? Is he a fit for what the Pelicans would be looking for? I mean, I'm a little worried based on what I know about Mo, just because I'm assuming it'll be like sort of a high floor, low ceiling kind of pick.
No, actually, he's very different than his brother. I mean, I would consider maybe the opposite of that. I think he's safe because he's an intangibles guy. He's got great size. They list him 6'9", but he's 6'8", 6'9". He's got great size for a wing. Really good defender. High IQ. He's another guy I probably should have thrown in that group from before. My big concern with him is he did shoot the ball well this year. I still don't trust him as just being a fluid shooter, and he's not really dynamic offensively. So the upside might be somewhat limited. But he's going to be a dang good player and would give that team a lot of versatility, which they have some guys like that, which, with Brandon Ingram and Najee Marshall, they're kind of, they're big wings, but they're kind of positionless guys that do a little bit of everything. You throw Wagner in there. I mean, he could be an interesting fit.
I'd be interested to see if they would throw him in at the 4 and maybe put Zion at the 5 at times. We've heard a lot about, at least in the Pelicans Twitter sphere and Pelican fandom, point Zion and him being able to play a bunch of different positions, and not necessarily the center, but it'd be intriguing to see what they do with Franz Wagner and whether he be a 3-4 kind of tweener. But I do find that a little interesting. Now, Scotty Barnes is another name that we've been hearing a lot about that the Pelicans would like, and that's really from the fans. So the thing that they're looking for is defense, effort plays, and shooting. And from what I've gathered, Scotty Barnes is known for those effort plays, defense kind of plays, but the jump shot appears to not quite be there. I think I looked at his numbers. The 3-point shot percentage wasn't great. But do you think that that's something that can be fixed? Do you think it's even a possibility he falls to 10?
Yeah, I would say he probably doesn't get to 10. I'm really high on Scotty Barnes. We have him at 6. I think he's, even though that's a tight range, that 6 to 10 range, I think he's going to be somewhere in there. And like I mentioned, I love the kid. I've got a funny story. The first time I crossed paths with him, it was at USA Basketball in Colorado Springs, and walking into the gym, and a lot of players, get out of their vans or whatever their transportation was, and never met Scotty before. He comes right up to me, introduces himself, gives me a big bear hug, and says, "Hey, I'm looking forward to you watching me." And it just kind of gives you a taste of the kid's personality. He's just got like a very upbeat, infectious personality, and it carries over the court. I mean, he is defensively, he's got the abilities to defend pretty much everybody on the floor, a motor to match, and just really a positive approach to the game and life for that matter. And he does a little bit of everything but shoot the ball at 6'9". And as far as his shooting goes, I don't think it's a lost cause. I don't know if he'll ever be a good shooter, but I think it's a situation where you can get him to where he's shooting the ball from outside enough to where you really focus in on what he is bringing to the table from a positive standpoint.
Okay. And again, I have done very little evaluation, so I'm assuming that Barnes is going to probably play a wing sort of position and be known as a wing defender.
It's interesting with him. Leonard Hamilton used him essentially as a big point guard this year. I personally like him more as like a point forward. So I mean, he's so versatile. I mean, was he a 3, 4? I mean, he's really just a positionless guy at 6'9" with I believe he's got a long wingspan as well. He pretty much can play with anybody.
Okay, sounds good. That would be something that the Pelicans could definitely use. The defense is definitely lacking at times. That's for sure for this team. Although it did get quite a bit better towards the end of the season. But anyway, so you mentioned James Bouknight. That's one of these guys who's going to be a shot creator, a shot maker. Is there anything else to his game that you like that he brings to the table or could bring to the table for the Pelicans?
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing with Bouknight, he's a natural born scorer. I mean he's hard to guard. He's coming at you, downhill type guy, and he's super athletic and explosive. Slashing, one man transition type guy. And he's pretty much built to be to get to the hole. I don't think shooting is necessarily his Achilles heel, but it's definitely something that he needs to improve on. And if he's able to shoot the ball at a high rate or a higher rate, I think he's got a chance of being, possibly even being a primary scorer for a team down the road. I'm really excited about James.
Okay. Now, last year when we were doing draft evaluation, stuff like that, I talked about getting a shot creator as well. And the name that came up in last year's draft was Tyrese Maxey. Are those two going to be any similar?
I mean, I struggled with Maxey last year from an evaluation standpoint. I was lower on him than most people. He's done good at what he does this year, right? He's a scoring guard, really assertive. I think he's a little one-dimensional as a 6'2" guy. I'd like him to be able to play point guard. With Bouknight, this is a guy that's 6'5", big-time athlete. There's no concern with him being a career, two guard. Whereas Maxey, I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of undersized guards that aren't points. Not real similar to me.
Sure. Okay. So now that we're talking about the possibility of Bouknight, if he were to fall to 10 or if the Pels somehow locked out and were able to move up or whatever, would he be able to step into sort of a tertiary scoring role behind Zion and Brandon Ingram, or would that take some development? I know you mentioned the jump shot isn't necessarily something that's going to be an advantage for him right away.
Yeah, I mean, I see him as a guy that it wouldn't shock me if he carved out a big role early on. And with the rookies, it's so hit or miss, and a lot of it is how does he do in training camp? Does he click with the coach right away? A lot of it's about opportunity. I mean, a lot of these rookies that did well this year, this kind of situation where the coach and the team believed him and threw him out there, and whether that be out of need or just a coach that didn't want to give him the old school rookie treatment. But Bouknight's a guy, would not surprise me if he were like a first team all rookie and was able to contribute at a high level right away. He's a very talented kid.
That's awesome. So one more little conversation about a specific player, because I've seen him a lot going to the Pelicans. A lot of Pelicans like him. Still talking about Corey Kissbert here. So the comp I've seen is he has the potential to be the Joe Harris, the Duncan Robinson, those type of shooters. Is that fair? Do you think that's fair to him? Do you think he can step in and contribute pretty much right away in terms of offering a little bit of spacing to this Pelicans offense? Because Steven Adams in the middle isn't necessarily the greatest thing in the world for them.
Not sure, yeah, and I do, and with Kissbert, he's an interesting guy. He's a little bit polarizing from a public standpoint. You get a lot of people that don't favor the 4-year seniors, and guy that might not have as much upside as some of the other guys that are in the late lottery, mid first. With Kissbert, I think he's plug and play. The Joe Harris comparison is being thrown around left and right, by myself included, and I think for good reason. They got comparable size, they know how to play. And they can just shoot the heck out of the ball. And there's a place for guys like that. And my confidence level that Kissbert's at least going to be a good rotational player that's going to stretch the floor is extremely high. And so if there's guys, I mean, it depends on the team, but if there's a guy you think could be plugged in right away, that's got to serve value to you. And Definitely a difficult decision if you're kind of weighing out a high risk, high reward guy compared to Kissbert. But I do think he'll probably go high just because of the safety.
Sure, that makes sense. And I know a lot of people are very anti high floor guys at that point in the lottery because it's about potential, right? So we'll see where the Pels go with that. I mean, Cairo is to a degree a potential pick last year, although he's had a fairly good rookie season, very minimal turnovers, all that. So intriguing thought, because there's a lot of different ways this could go. I know you mentioned the point guard position as well, because, well, as a guy who covers the Pelicans, I don't know what they're doing at that position either, because who knows where Lonzo's going to be. Eric Bledsoe's is essentially an expiring, and then you got Kyra Lewis, who very well could be traded as well because of the need to start winning in New Orleans. Now, with that said, a big issue on this team is obviously the three things that I mentioned: shooting, IQ, and toughness. But what it's come down to a lot of times is just having competent guard play. Like, if you don't turn the ball over, if you have pretty good shot selection, like the pairing of Lonzo and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, while we didn't get to see it a lot this year, was really, really fun. And Eric Bledsoe was a massive disappointment. Now, around that 10 spot, and we've been talking a lot about wings, about shooters, and a little bit about Franz Wagner, who is kind of known as a tweener 3-4. Any point guards in this upper echelon of the draft? I guess the top 10. I know we know about Jalen Suggs and Cade Cunningham's ability in the pick and roll, and not necessarily that he's a point guard, but any point guards in that 8 to 14 area that aren't not going to be wings, not going to be shooting guards, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's two guys that come to mind. The one being Davion Mitchell from Baylor, who I mentioned before.
Sure.
I think even though that's probably on his high side, I think that grouping, I mean, like I said, I mean, 7-8 to probably 20. I mean, guys could kind of fall, a bunch of guys that kind of fall into that window. But Davion's a guy, I personally would take a look at him in that range. Another guy to keep an eye on is Josh Giddey, a young prospect from Australia. Right now, he's being used as a 6'8" point guard, but I mean, he's a do it all kind of guy. I mean, he's even played some small ball forward in his career. Natural playmaker, ambidextrous. Finish with both hands, make passes with both hands. Just high IQ. I'm pretty excited about Josh. I mean, I think we've got him at 14, which has been the highest we've had him all year. He seems like he's trending at the right time. I think everybody's just kind of gathering information on him at the same rate, and it's all positive. And he's done so well in Australia, which is it's a grown man's league, and he's had a bunch of triple doubles. So he's a guy to kind of keep an eye on. For the Pelicans, a guy that's 6'8" and does it all.
That sounds like it'd be a really interesting offense to have him and Zion, two incredibly versatile guys on the offensive side of the ball. Now, when it comes to the other need being a need might not be the right word for it. Spacing bigs are more prevalent than they ever have been before, but they're still not all that common. There anybody in this draft that really does fill that role of being strictly a big? Like, you can't switch them between that 3-4, maybe a 4-5, and they can light it up from, maybe not light it up, but shoot well enough from deep that would complement Zion?
Well, I mean, one guy that's interesting in the range that they're going to be in is Kai Jones. I mean, he's certainly not a sniper, but he's a modern stretch big. Is he a 4? Is he a 5? I don't know, but he's 6'11". He can move, shoots the ball enough. Really good athlete, run. Sort of a rim runner and floor spacer. He hasn't been overly productive at Texas in 2 years, but I mean, he's really teased you with upside. He's a guy to keep an eye on. Another guy which doesn't necessarily fit like a true stretch big. It's more of a stretch 4 that can play a little 3. Is Trey Murphy from Virginia. I don't think he's probably should go as high as that New Orleans first pick, but if they wanted to get in the late first or use one of their early second round picks, Trey Murphy from Virginia, that kid's 6'9", really good team defender, and just he is a sniper. And so I think a guy like him, with the way the game's played today, I would bet he goes on the high side of probably being a first round pick, just because he's a specialist.
Okay. Now, in terms of Kai Jones, I know you mentioned upside. He's from Texas, right? University of Texas.
Yeah, he's from the Bahamas, but he's a sophomore from this team
Sure.
playing in Texas.
Sure. Now the Pels have a high-end center on their roster, Jackson Hayes from Texas. They're kind of known for getting out centers now. Some of those high ceiling guys. Is Kai Jones a project in that arena of being able to develop a consistent jump shot and be playable in the NBA?
He's definitely a project. He has work to do. The way I look at him is he's got all of the tools. I mean, like his shooting abilities there. He's got all the tools. He's just got to put it all together a little bit more. So he is a bit of a project, but I mean, I think he's capable of probably being thrown out there a little bit and doing some stuff.
Speaking of which, we're going to go off on a little different bit of an area quick. Have you seen the development of Jackson Hayes at all?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Hasn't that been crazy?
No, it's great. I was so high on him, coming out of Texas. I watched him a lot, and it's nice to see that it's clicking because I know for a little while there, a lot of people were concerned, myself included.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw some tweets from myself, and I don't know if you follow anybody else that's in Pelicans Twitter, but we were calling for Billy Hernangomez minutes earlier in the year. And like Billy's a serviceable center, he'll give you minutes. He won't make a ton of mistakes, but
Right.
Jackson, that development, what he's done, what Stan Van Gundy and his staff has done for Jackson Hayes and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, it's been awesome. I mean, Jackson went 3 for 3 from deep in one of these last few games of the season. It was crazy.
Yeah, and I think both those guys are perfect examples. It's something I've been talking about a lot lately is everybody's so quick to judge this rookie class. And it's just like, all right, keep in mind, there wasn't a summer league. There wasn't really a training camp. There's very little practice time this year. Some guys didn't get great opportunities, and it's just you got to give these rookies some time, and in every year, but especially this past year, it's just it's been real screwy. Jackson, Nickeil, I mean, it's nice that they're clicking.
Yeah, I mean, number 1 overall pick Anthony Edwards didn't look too hot to start the season. Then he finished scoring 40. More than 40 twice. So yeah, I think patience is definitely a virtue when it comes to these young guys in the draft. Now, I know your expertise is draft evaluation and looking at these young guys, but by your estimation, who would you likely send to the Pelicans in a mock draft? This is solely based on like needs for the Pelicans. Like if you look at their roster and say, this is a guy who they would need, or would you just go best player available in this situation?
I'm not, I mean, the best player available, term has been used so much for years. Right. And I think it's pretty misleading to me. It's a phrase that a general manager uses to deflect. I mean, of course you're going to take the best player available. Right. But it's like, what does that mean? The best player available for one team might not be the best player available for the next team. It's just sort of a vague term in my opinion. And so, off the cuff, I do like Kissbert for New Orleans. I really like that fit. I think, I'm assuming the fan base is a little disappointed with how the year turned out. I know there was high expectations going in, but I mean, they're a young team that, you'd have to expect all of these guys to come back just a little bit better. Throwing a guy like Kissbert who fits a need as far as stretching the floor and being a specialist and a guy that can contribute right away. That would be a guy that I would look hard at just because I think that he could be a nice glue piece that help you get over the hump.
Okay, that's good to hear. That's kind of been the guy I've been leaning towards as well. Obviously, talked pretty highly of him here. Is there any player in that range where you would say, I don't like the pick? Like, and I know you've mentioned a lot of good things about these guys, and it could very well be for a fit where you say, I don't like that pick for the Pelicans right there. And I'm totally going off script and different questions than I sent you. So take all the time you need to formulate an answer. I know that there's these specific needs for the Pelicans, shooting, defense, etc. But if they went maybe in a completely different direction and grabbed somebody where it was just like, he's a good player, not necessarily a great fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing with the Pelicans and Griff's been pretty vocal about this of wanting to give Zion floor spacing. So I think they need to take that in consideration. I mean, we brought up Scotty Barnes. I don't know if it's a great fit from that standpoint because I mean he's definitely not a shooter. Bouknight's not a shooter, but he's just such a dynamic scorer. I think it kind of like offsets that issue a little bit. Isaiah Jackson's another guy. I mean, I guess he could be in the mix there. Sort of like a roaming big that's a big time athlete, shot blocker. I don't know if that's a great fit. I think Zion probably needs to be with some guys that are pretty skilled that they can at least shoot it enough to where they have to be defended on the outside. Those are the guys that come to mind right off the bat.
Okay. Now, before we go on to some of the more fun stuff, I got this question here from Drew Sokol at W Drew Sokol. Who would you try to trade up for? Is there any player you would say, oh, I really want to go get that guy if I'm the Pelicans?
I love Evan Mobley. You know, I mean, that's a tall task to move up to get him, but I mean, you put him with Zion like that would be the very interesting 1-2 punch. And that if you know, if I were Griff, that would be my ultimate, the guy that, you know, would be top of my ultimate wish list.
What is it about Mobley that you love so much?
You know, he's so unique. You know, people have asked me this a lot about comparisons and all that, and he's hard to compare because he's a unicorn, you know. And you know, what the one I've come up with is he's a better version of Porzingis, because I think he's going to play a similar role as far as being a stretch big or face up big. Is he a 4? Is he a 5? I don't care. You can just put him on the floor. He's going to block shots. He's shown ability, you know, at least potential of being a guy that can shoot the ball well. Puts it on the floor. He finishes. You know, great kid. I really like Evan Mobley. I think the kid's going to be a star.
Is there any reason for concern? Is there anything, you know, I know a lot of these kids just really don't know how to play defense coming in the NBA because they've never just been able to rely on their athleticism or just score more than the other guys. Is defense something that Mobley brings to the table?
You know, he's not very physical. I mean, I've watched him for years in high school, and I was very concerned at one point, like, hey, this guy is just so thin. I don't, you know, this could be a big problem. He's gotten stronger. From my understanding, you know, he signed with Wasserman Media Group. He's been working out hard in LA and adding a lot of strength. And he's not the toughest guy. I mean, he's not really an alpha dog, but he's just so talented. I think it makes up for it. And defensively, I mean, honestly, he's one of the best defensive players I've ever seen at the college level. I mean, his ability to not only block shots, but change them, and not even just being around the rim, but like all over the floor. I mean, he's blocking jump shots and changing shots. And I mean, defensively, I mean, him and Zion, I mean, it'd be very interesting because they're so different as far as their body types and what they bring to the table. Would probably complement each other very well.
Zion definitely has. Oh, go ahead.
I would say I don't know how you're going to get him, but yeah, that was sort of my my fun answer, I guess I could say.
Sure. So yeah, Zion has a lot of room to grow defensively, and you're right. I think Mobley would be really. They're just completely different body types, so it'd be really fun to see what they could do on the court together. Now, the Pels obviously struck gold in 2019, got that #1 overall pick. We talked about Evan Mobley. Let's say, you know, maybe not the #1 overall pick, but maybe they get 3, 4. Do you think it's best for them to try to trade out of that? Or do you think these guys like the Jalen Greene, the Jalen Suggs would be worth it for a team that is in a place where they need to win and win now?
Yeah, I think Jalen Greene would be a great fit there. I mean, he's really, I mean, be more like a better version of James Bouknight, just a scoring 2 guard that shoots the ball better. And so, I mean, he would be a guy that, you know, probably could pencil him in as your long-term starting shooting guard. Nickeil Alexander-Walker's got so much versatility. You could play with him, you could back him up, and he kind of just be that you know, three-headed monster. Probably, you know, if Lewis is developing properly. So Jalen Greene would be the guy for me outside of the top 2 with Cade and Evan.
So for Greene, I know he tweeted and then proceeded to delete the tweet where he said he thought he would have been #1 overall if he hadn't gone to the G League and gone to college. Do you think there's some merit to that?
I don't know. To me, it seems like he's just trying to stir the pot a little bit. You know, I think his marketability is high. I mean, this is a good draft in terms of this at least this top 5. I mean, right now we've got Cunningham, Mobley, Jalen Greene, Kuminga, and Jalen Suggs. I mean, you know, you could mix up that order any way you like. They're all really good players.
For Kuminga and Greene, has it made it any different in terms of what you've done for evaluation? The fact that they went to the G League as opposed to college, or I know a lot of these guys, well, Didi Lozada, obviously he's in Brazil, but he went to go play in the NBL, or RJ Hampton went to go play in the NBL as opposed to go to college. Has that made any different, like the process, any different for them going to the G League?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is more, not necessarily the conversation between college and the G League for these guys. It was that we're getting through a pandemic, and so the scouting landscape has been very different all year. I mean, I was much more aggressive this year than most of the teams. I mean, a lot of NBA teams didn't get clearance to travel at all, and I mean, some didn't even get the clearance to go to local games where they drove, and so. I mean, the lack of exposure, top to bottom, was pretty significant this year compared to other years. And so I think that's the biggest issue in the G League. Really, they did their best, with all of the curveballs that were thrown at them, but it's just a weird year.
And so we've gone off route a little bit again, and I'm going to continue that route. So with that, were you like sought out by NBA teams to hear your evaluation and stuff like that because of that purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to teams regularly, sort of like a healthy level of exchanging notes. I mean, obviously there's always a line that can't be crossed, with me and with them. But yeah, that's a big part of our operations is just sort of networking and comparing notes a little bit.
Have you ever? I know you were a scout, or sorry, not a scout, an agent. Were you ever a scout for a team or anything like that?
No, my dad and my uncles have worked in front offices since the late '70s. So I mean, I grew up in and around it. So I've never formally worked for a team, but I've been exposed to it so much. I feel like I have.
Yeah, basketball's in your blood by the sounds of it. That's awesome. So the Pels have 5 picks in total in this draft, probably 10, and then 34, 40, 43, and 53 for this year's draft. The possibility of them packaging all of those and plus a player, plus future picks, plus all this extra stuff is very high considering the win now. This all might be for naught, this conversation, considering the 10th pick might be on the move. But in those second round areas, the 34, 40, 43, 53, I don't know how big of a difference there is in that range. But are there any players in the second round that have that potential to sort of be a steal in that arena that the Pelicans need as far as, the shooting, the toughness, the defense, all of that?
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts come to mind. I mean, one, doing a mock draft when there's teams that have multiple picks is a total nightmare for me because it's just, we do our best of like putting ourselves. I mean, with New Orleans, I put myself in Griff's shoes and like, hey, what would I do? And and the reality of it is, I wouldn't want 5 rookies coming into my locker room next year. So it's just like, the possibility of, trading, packaging these to move up or move down or sell the picks, which I probably wouldn't sell the picks, but it's just not very realistic that they're going to take all these kids and bring them all over. So we look at draft and stash situations and whatnot. As far as specific players, I wrote down the guys we have on our mock draft now. So at number 8, we haven't taken James Bouknight, which, for their sake, I hope he's there at 10, where they're likely to be picking. 35, Marcus Zagorowski from Creighton. I really would like this pick for them. I just high confidence level that the kid's at least going to be a good, solid backup point guard. He's sort of, I don't know if he's going to be quite as good at this, but it reminds me of Malachi Flynn. Doesn't blow you away with his physical tools, but just a tough kid that knows how to play, that could shoot it. I think he'd be a great piece for as they build out their team. Isaiah Todd at number 38, more of an upside guy. He was another kid that was on the G League. Just a skilled, modern day 4 that's got upside. I think he's a little high risk, high reward. I don't know how much I trust him as a prospect. But I mean, when you got 5 picks, you got the luxury of taking some swings, and I think he'd be worth it at that point. At 43. I've got the big kid Baji from FC Barcelona. This kid's 7'1", moves well, sort of like a rim protector. He'd probably be a draft and stash type. Again, I took into consideration the 5 picks. And then with the last pick, Terrence Shannon from Texas Tech. Good athlete, wing, potential of like 3 and D. With him, it was more of, just a high value pick. I mean, he gets to that point in the draft, you got to take a look at him just because he's got some talent.
Awesome. So there's a name that I'm hearing a lot not necessarily in Pels Twitter, but just NBA Twitter in general, and people who evaluate players coming into the draft, and that's Alperen Sengun. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. I've seen him in the lottery. I've seen him in the second round, and from what I've seen, he's like a fluid big and a guy who has some potential in the league. Where do you have him in your mock?
I think we have him in the 20s. Let me actually. I'm curious. Let's check it real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, we've got him at 25 right now. He's one of those guys. I mean, he's chipped away at me. I mean, most years I would have traveled to Turkey to see him. Obviously, travel this year has been a little tricky, and I'm a little disappointed. We're going to see the Excel Sports Management guys in Miami next week, but he's not getting to town for a few more weeks, so just going to miss him. Hopefully, I'm still waiting to see if what kind of media access there's going to be at the combine. But he's the guy. I mean, just watching film on him and having our guys in Europe fill us in. He's just been extremely productive at being a young guy in a really good league in Turkey. You really can't deny it. I think the big issue, the one thing that has held me back with him is he's a little bit of a throwback. I mean, he's kind of just like a brute, low post scorer type guy. And those guys just don't hold nearly as much value as they used to. And so that's the holdup. But an 18-year-old that's proven to be productive at a high level. You got to have a certain level of confidence in him, and I think he'd be a solid pick in the second round, or in the first round. I don't know if he's a good fit for New Orleans. I mean, I think they need guys, like I had mentioned, they need guys that can stretch it and that are skilled. They don't need a low post scorer. I think clog in the middle for Zion would not be beneficial.
Okay, duly noted. I know there's a decent amount of people that have talked about him, and again, my evaluation is not quite there, so I'm trusting you, Matt. I'm going with what you've got. Now, before we go, we do have some just general NBA listeners as well, and some fans of the Pels that just pay attention to the NBA. So a couple just general questions for you about that top class of guys, those top 5 guys, because we're hearing all about them. It's the top 5, and then it's everybody else. Now, Mobley is your favorite. You had mentioned him. Is he your number 1 guy, or is Cade Cunningham up there for you?
No, we got Cade Cunningham number 1. Cade's such a safe pick. I mean, 6'8", do-it-all guy, and it's just, I don't think anybody's questioning that the kid's at the very least is going to be a very good starter. I'm really intrigued with Mobley. In my roles in NBA draft analyst, I don't play favorites, but if I were, Mobley is one of my favorites. I'm really intrigued by the kid. He's so unique. But right now, I would give Cade the edge as the top prospect in the draft. I think it's a little closer than a lot of people are saying.
From what I've gathered, it's like you said, the frame, the ability, and the pick and roll for him, and that's all that I've gathered. What else is it that, and is there anything else that sticks out to you about Cade?
Just the versatility. I think, this day and age where, versatility and outside shooting come at a premium. Cade essentially can be played with any player, and I just really like guys like that. And, I think he's got the ability of being the offensive engine for a team, whether you play him at the 1, 2, or 3. The safety in it. He just does a little bit of everything. There's no like big glaring holes in his game.
Now, there's also, like I said, those 4-ish other guys. I've seen Jonathan Kuminga falling out of that top 5 group in some individuals, mock drafts, what have you, their big board, saying he's like the 7th or 8th best player. Do you think there's any merit to that, or do you have any concerns about his game relative to those other 4 guys?
He's in my top 5. I really like him. Right now we have him going number 4 to the Cleveland. This is before the tiebreaker, which I believe Cleveland would be slotted at 5 now. So we would flip-flop those picks to Jalen Suggs. He's in that group for me. Cade and Evan are the top 2 guys. And then with Jalen Greene, Jalen Suggs, and Kuminga, I think there's a reasonable debate, of that order. And I think a lot of it's going to depend on the team. As far as like issues with his game, he's got the great physical profile. The kid is just a jacked up big wing. I think he could probably play some small ball 4 when it's all said and done. Has shown some promise of being a shooter, long range and the mid range, and then he's high flyer. Finishing at the rim. He'll be on Sports Center a few times next year, I'm sure.
Now, the one player we haven't talked about in that group is Jalen Suggs. Is he a guy that intrigues you big time with that crew, or do you think that he's an instant impact point guard? Because we've seen some of the crazy plays that he made at Gonzaga, but what does that translate to?
Yeah, I mean, I love Jalen Suggs too. I mean, that top five, I'm really high on all of them, and they're all a little different. Suggs, I would say probably from just a raw talent standpoint, probably has the least amount of talent of the group, but he's got all of the intangibles. I mean, this kid is just a natural born winner. I mean, it's been talked about a ton about his background as a football player, as a quarterback, and it really, you can tell it translates to his, to the game as a point guard. I mean, he is a floor general, and his reads are similar to being like a football quarterback. Such a smart guy, and he's tough as heck. He's hard to guard. I mean, I just have a super high confidence level in him that he's going to be a good starting point guard at the very least.
There you go. Matt Babcock at Matt Babcock 11 on Twitter. Give him a follow. Excellent draft evaluation, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more after that 12-day trip when you get to see a little bit more. Is there anywhere else we can send them? Basketballnews.com, and then BabcockHoops.com as well. Is there anywhere else we can send them for you?
Yeah, BabcockHoops.com. We pretty much took all of our coverage from there and shifted it over to BasketballNews.com. So yeah, follow us there. I also do some stuff for CBS Sports HQ. I'm sure I'll do some mock drafts for them coming up. And yeah, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, we're everywhere. BasketballNews.com is on the rise. So yeah, follow us. We're getting after it.
Awesome. Good stuff, Matt. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.